And want to thank everyone for joining us for hour number two of the program today. And uh, last week on Monday, Monday morning, Randy Staples joined us during his weekly briefing. Of course, he's the publisher of Idaho Weekly Briefing, and we had a discussion about medical marijuana. I don't think we're looking at recreational marijuana as being the discussion in the legislature coming up in Boise next year, but there will be an argument being made by some for legalizing medical marijuana in Idaho. It's not the first time these arguments have come about. We also have a number of people from out of state interests who are making an argument for it as well, and some of those are also arguing for recreational uses. And a couple of days later, I had a response in my email from prosecuting attorney Grant Lobes from here in Twin Falls County. And he said he took issue with some of the arguments that were being made by the proponents. I don't know that we would necessarily call Randy a proponent, but some of the things Randy talked about, at least you thought, gave the wrong impression initially. First of all, welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Uh, I note that even though this is a controversial issue, and I normally would be on an extreme side of this, you've eclipsed that for me by writing something yesterday that makes me look like a moderate. So that's great. It takes some of the heat off me. So
Well, there's a lot of discussion about what we're talking about in Boise. Is it medical or is it recreational or
well, it depends who's talking.
sure?
And there are three, I would say, and you can break it down more than that, but three main things that are being discussed with regard to marijuana in Idaho these days. Um, Obviously, there are people that are in favor of recreational marijuana, legalizing marijuana the way we've done in Colorado and some other neighboring states. So that would be one. The second would be a broad-based kind of medical marijuana issue, which is represented best by the petition that's now going around. And then third is the issue that we took up last year in the legislature, having to do with epilepsy and children and a product called CBD oil, which is a derivative of marijuana, and which the legislature passed, and then the governor vetoed, and instead put in place a trial, an FDA-approved trial system for Epidiolex, which is CBD oil without THC. THC being the active, um, hallucinogenic ingredient in marijuana. So that is those are the three big issues really, and they get all mixed up depending upon who you talk to, and there are greatly different arguments for and against all three of those. So it all depends what you're talking about, and I think part of the problem I had with what Randy was saying the other day, and I understand he was trying to do a broad general overview, but part of the problem is all three of them were getting all mixed up, and you can't talk about them all mixed up. You have to know what you're talking about because there's a big difference between each of the three of those.
And he did though allude at one point though that in some cases where you have states that have approved the medical use, he admits because some people are just plainly smoking joints for their medicinal use,
Mhm.
but that somehow you can't control it becoming then more for recreational use, and somebody shares what they have from their medical supply with a neighbor who just wants to get a high. I mean, he didn't go into a lot of depth on that, but I thought he at least was alluding to that, and that the problem with this is if you approve one, it makes it difficult to control sometimes those other uses that happen.
Well, sure, and of course we have that. Before somebody calls in and says, "Well, what about this drug and that drug, and what about hydrocodone?" and all of that is true. Any prescription drug can be abused. I can get prescription drugs and give them to my buddy, and then I'm committing a crime and I'm abusing it, and so is he, and now he's using it for things that he shouldn't be using it for. And of course, that is a big problem with medical marijuana. And it depends how the statute is drafted too. It depends how much oversight there is by doctors. It just depends what form you take the medical marijuana in. If you take it in pills that don't have any THC in them, Well, that's a lot different than if you just are allowed to grow plants and smoke it and put it in brownies and such. It depends also on who can do the prescribing. You know, in some medical marijuana uh, formulations, there is a rigid, doctor has to prescribe it, has to be prescribed for a certain number of ailments and in a certain form. And in others, it's, you don't even need a doctor. You need any healthcare professional, which can be, broadly defined in the statute to mean a lot of people. And in some of the medical marijuana formulations of the proposal, you can have all kinds of marijuana plants for yourself and self-administer your medical marijuana. So it all depends what we're specifically talking about. The petition that's going around Idaho right now allows for 12 marijuana plants for people to have and for you to have 24 ounces of marijuana for medical use. I mean, that's um, far and away more than what the felony trafficking amount is right now in Idaho. That's a huge amount of personal use medical marijuana to have. And so it all depends on the specifics.
The oil that you referenced, now obviously majority of legislators, and we're talking then Republicans, are looking to be compassionate. If
Sure.
I recall, the governor's argument was he's not trying to play the villain here. He was concerned though that this opens the door for these uh, other forms we've been talking about, and so he might be looking just for a bit more clarity. So we could perhaps see that proposal come back this year, perhaps actually become law. But the oil itself would not be anything, I guess, that people in law enforcement would be opposed to, or in the justice system. Then
Well, it depends. The bill that was proposed by Kurt McKenzie last year and which passed allows for people to access an unregulated type of CBD oil that nobody knows what's in it. You drive to Colorado, you pick this stuff up, somebody makes it in a bathtub in their, back of their house or, in a factory that's churning out, recreational marijuana, and they say, "Well, try this. This is something we came up with. It's not tested. There's no way to know what ingredients are in it." The What the governor did was take the advice of the American Epilepsy Society, which of course is in the business of being compassionate, as I think the governor wanted to be, and those opposed to the CBD oil legislation. I don't know a single person that was opposed to it because they wanted to see children suffer. The opposition was because of the open-ended nature of the legislation. What the governor did was create a specific medical trial open to a certain number of people who qualify with the qualifying diagnosis, overseen by a doctor, to determine whether a pure grade CBD oil without the hallucinogenic compound in it, created in a lab by people under strict, conditions, could help children with epilepsy. And that trial is ongoing, and from what I understand, is yielding positive results. And there's a decent chance, because of what the governor did, that people will be able to have their insurance pay for doctor prescribed pure CBD oil to help kids with these conditions, rather than just go to essentially the corner drug dealer who just happens to be in Colorado, where corner drug dealing is now legal.
and that corner drug dealer could be pouring pancake syrup into the
Sure,
mix
we
just
have
to
no
cut it.
idea.
Right.
If you read the letter that the American Epilepsy Society sent to the governor, it has a lengthy catalog of the dangers of the kind of CBD oil that is contaminated with all kinds of unknown things that are coming out of Colorado. In fact, according to that letter, there is not a single person, not a single neurologist in Colorado recommending the use of the CBD oil that McKenzie's legislation last year was legalizing. So it's actually a danger to do what was being proposed as a medicinal remedy, rather than to test it through the proper channels and have it prescribed by proper physicians.
I get an impression that a lot of people then who are angry with what the governor did and they're angry with Idaho, especially the outsiders, really have another axe to grind. It isn't so much about this oil that they're able to use that to get a little bit of media compassion, if you will, that tug at people's emotional strings. But a lot of people who are making the most noise about it simply are upset. They're not going to profit.
Well, and I don't know. It depends on the person. Obviously, the legislature heard a lot of testimony from mothers and fathers, and even I think there were children in the room. I don't know whether they testified who have legitimate problems, who demand our compassion for what they're going through. And those people, I think, are sincere. I think that somebody who is trying to get medication for their child, they command attention and respect. I think there are others, though, who are thinking, we don't want to get this through, Bristol Myers Corporation or a company that's making it pharmaceutically. We want to get it through the guy who's just making it on the back lot in some, marijuana farm in or in Colorado, because it's more profitable that way. It's unregulated, and we can use it for whatever we want because it might have THC in it. So again, I think you have the entire spectrum from the really sincere people with real problems who are just desperate and trying to find a solution to the people who really are trying to push for uh, ultimately recreational marijuana legalization, which of course is what they did in Colorado.
And I think that they're the people, as you mentioned earlier, that we're confusing about three different issues here.
Right.
They would prefer that we remain confused.
Oh, sure. The more confused the public is, the more people can get things that shouldn't be passed. The more people will sign a petition when they're told, sign this, people are suffering. And you say, well, I don't want people to suffer. Sure, I'll sign that. Well, but if you read it and if you know what you're reading, you realize that this is way beyond what is necessary to help people who are legitimately suffering. And, there isn't, I think there would be the Idaho legislature has absolutely shown that it's compassionate to people who are suffering. That's why they passed the bill. And I think it's unfair to the governor to say that he was not compassionate when he vetoed it. He vetoed it, but he put in place something that will work better, and will serve more people and will be more affordable and will be safer.
We've got more with prosecuting attorney Grant Lobes coming up in just a few minutes. He's here, of course, from Twin Falls County. If you have a question or comment, too, you can reach us after the break. The telephone number is 736-0300. That's 736-0300. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. It's 33. Bill Colley with you as well on KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Our studio guest is, of course, Twin Falls County Prosecutor Grant Lobes, and we're talking about medical marijuana. Actually, it's a multiple here: medical marijuana, and one, in fact, very narrow slice, if you will, of what medical marijuana would be, and it's actually an extract. We're also talking about other issues related to that and how they all get confused, and that would be recreational use and the like. It's 9:23. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. 33, and our telephone number, if you'd like to chime in on this subject, 736-0300, 736-0300. Now, culturally, I mean, I understand Washington State, California, Oregon making some of the decisions they've done. But Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho, I would think that we're probably still a generation away from anybody in the legislature of those states going along with recreational approval. I mean, I just don't see it happening. I don't think people are really clamoring for it either.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that I'd see a petition going around that like the one that's going around right now, and we don't know whether it'll gain enough signatures. But it's there's a lot of money behind this in state after state. A lot of money is pumped into the pro marijuana campaign, whether it's for medical or for recreational in some states. Um, Idaho is often seen as a small, cheap state to do business in, a place where your dollar, your advertising and lobbying dollar goes a long way. It wouldn't surprise me to see a push for it here. There's certainly a small and vocal minority of people that are pushing for it. Um, and, depending upon what you ask people, In polls, there are a large number that are in favor of medical marijuana, but it depends on the question. I mean, if you ask one question, you get one answer. If you ask another question, you get another answer. For instance, if you ask, do you support changing Idaho law to allow terminally and seriously ill patients to use or purchase marijuana for medical purposes? People are going to say yes to that, and they do. If you, however, ask, should we allow the sale and manufacture of marijuana for medical purposes without the part about the terminally ill people, then people are fairly substantially opposed to it. And if you ask, do you support the legalization of marijuana in Idaho, you get an overwhelming opposition from Idaho citizens to that question. So it all depends what question you ask, and it depends how you mix all of these things together. Anytime you ask, I would hope that this is true, and it is. Anytime you ask an Idaho citizen, do you want to help terminally ill people who are suffering great pain? And especially if you throw children into that, they're going to say, well, yeah, what can I do to help? And that's kind of where the legislature was last year. And it's what the medical marijuana, you know, argument is targeted towards. But it's a complex issue. You can't just say, oh, yeah, people can use it for medical all day long. It's fine by me because how is it regulated? What is it? And really, what are the medical effects on, your average person if they start smoking marijuana? And there's quite a lot of data that it's not good.
This morning, I had an email message from one of the leaders, national leaders of an organization called Reconsider, which
Mhm.
are a lot of people who are in law enforcement or prosecutors. And there's a prominent one from, I know, Seattle who makes appearances around the country. And he was pointing out, he said, we'd be better, our law enforcers would be better off if they could go after people who are doing more serious crimes than growing a plant. Now, I don't know that that attitude is shared by any law enforcers that I know, but
Well,
would
that
it make
and
your job easier?
Well, that's a straw man argument. That assumes that every morning the Twin Falls County Sheriff's deputies suit up and go raid houses where they think somebody's got a marijuana plant or a marijuana cigarette. That's not the way that works. I mean, almost all of the marijuana simple possession cases, like you've got a cigarette or you got a little baggie of marijuana that you roll your own and you get high once in a while. All of those cases, by and large, are the policeman is stopping the person for something else or arresting them for something else, or they have a warrant and they're brought into the jail and searched and they got marijuana cigarettes on them. So it's not a primary enforcement for any agency that I know of. Uh, but on the other hand, if they find it and it's against the law, well, you're going to get charged for it. The focus in marijuana control for law enforcement is the people who are moving a lot, people who maybe have 100 plants in their backyard and somebody spotted it, and who are growing it for sale. People who are bringing in pounds of it, and we see every couple days we see so and so arrested somewhere in Idaho with 25 pounds of marijuana in his trunk. So those are the people that, to the extent that law enforcement is focusing on marijuana, they're focusing on that as they are with heroin dealers and methamphetamine dealers. So it's really, and that whole part of it is often misstated. For instance, our jails are full of people who have simple possession marijuana. Well, that's not true. It's just simply not the case. Our prisons certainly aren't full of those people because it isn't a felony in Idaho. You can't go to prison for it. Um, in order to be eligible to go to prison, you've got to be possessing a large amount or dealing in drugs to other people. By and large, people who have a marijuana cigarette for personal use, who are arrested or cited, they're usually just given a ticket. They're paying fines, they're doing probation, um, and they're only ever seen the inside of a jail if they violate their probation in numerous ways. So again, there's so much misinformation about what is happening that it's hard to know how to change to something else.
Can you stick around a bit longer? Because I know
Sure.
there's a couple more questions I have on the subject. We have a hard break coming up. Grant Lobes, who's our Twin Falls County prosecutor, is in studio with us this morning. It's coming up on 9:30. Right now, it's 32. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Our studio guest is Grant Lobes. He's the Twin Falls County prosecutor. We're talking about some of the efforts for legalization of marijuana in various forms or for various uses this morning on the program. If you have a question or comment, you can reach us by dialing 736-0300. It's 934 and it's 33. Uh, here's a question for you, because we talked a little bit about how you said that's a straw man, that police are chasing around looking for someone who's carrying a joint in their purse.
Right.
It's not at all what they're doing. Uh, but we're going to take a call first off the bat here, but I've got a follow-up question to that in just a moment. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Grant Lobes on KLIX.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Idaho is supposed to have this reputation. Of course, it's a 100% Republican-dominated state, and I believe Mr. Lobes is part of the Republican establishment. Isn't that correct?
I don't know what the Republican establishment is. I am a Republican who's elected in Twin Falls County. But
by the way, I did see you at the
I don't
convention.
know exactly what that term means.
You don't know exactly what okay. All
no,
right,
I don't get invited to the governor's house for lunch or cocktails or hang out with my senators or, the big wheels. But I am a Republican. That's true.
Isn't the Republican mantra part of keep government out of our lives? Isn't that one of the tenets of the Republican Party?
Yeah, I think it all depends on the issue, of course. I mean,
of course.
My job, as you well know, my job is the place where government is in your lives more than any other. I mean, my job is to enforce laws and to prosecute people who violate them. And there are a lot of people that I prosecute who wish that I would stay out of their lives. But it all depends. I mean, but yeah, I think in general, Republicans generally stand for less government.
Right, unless it's something they don't like, and then they want the government all over the place. Idaho is still trying to curb abortion rights as much as possible for women. We have a situation in Gooding where a woman lost her child because she was trying to give him some alternative medication.
What's the point here? Is this about medical marijuana or?
Yes, if you let me finish, Bill, I'd be happy to let you know what the point is.
Well, it's not about abortion. We're talking about marijuana legalization.
I'm talking about marijuana right now. There's a woman in Gooding whose child was taken away because she treated him with cannabis, which helped his medical situation.
Do we know that for sure, or is that just an opinion on your part?
Well, I guess that's about as big an opinion as that diatribe that you printed yesterday in the Times News, which didn't state one single fact, just a bunch of.
I know those people I mentioned. I know. I talked to, I mentioned the people. I didn't give their names because I'm not embarrassing anybody here. But
there wasn't a single fact in that entire article.
I cited people that I actually have experience with, and so your point is.
Back in high school? What year was that, Bill?
Well, one of them was just arrested again last year for cooking up meth, so it was 40 years past high school.
So you're saying
but where are you going with all of this?
Everybody who's ever used marijuana starts cooking meth. That's your point.
Well, apparently he did, so that leaves the opportunity open that other people may be doing the same.
My God. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
Did the caller have a question? I mean, we got off track a little, but.
But there you go again. You brought up a point. Your job is to enforce laws. You don't get to interpret those. You have to just enforce them as the legislature has written them, right?
Correct. And, and I obviously, as I am today, I have opinions about things too. And the caller makes, a point that we often hear that Idaho and other states that are interested in personal freedom is populated by a lot of people who want the government off their backs and want the government out of their lives. And I guess taken in its extreme form, that's kind of an anarchy. And if we took that opinion, we would obviously have no drug laws at all. And we would, it would be okay to have heroin, and it would be okay to have methamphetamine, and it would be okay to buy it and sell it to whoever wanted to buy it. With regard to marijuana, I think we need to again decide as a society if we are in favor of just legalizing it and letting people do whatever they want with it. That's one thing, and that would be essentially what the caller was saying. If, however, we want to go down the medical marijuana road, if we want to legalize it for some things and not for others, well, actually, um, that creates a lot more government than we currently have involved with marijuana because you'd have to have the Department of Human Services, the Department of Health and Welfare, the Department of Labor, the Department of everything. Every single department you can think of would have to get involved in the massive government that would be required to, uh, you know, put in place a medical marijuana system. And if you look at what happened in Colorado when they legalized marijuana there, the bureaucracy that's required to regulate the marijuana industry there is enormous. In fact, you heard all these things about how when we legalize marijuana, we're going to get all these tax revenue. It doesn't pay for anything except the massive bureaucracy that is required to maintain the system there.
And that's a fact. We've got more. Can you stick around through
Yeah,
the rest of the program? More with
sure.
Grant Lopes coming up in just a few minutes. He's our Twin Falls County prosecutor. And as far as citing facts, I don't have anyone yet who's ever told me why firing up a joint is going to make them taller, healthier, prettier. So, again, caller, I don't know that you're citing facts either. We're taking your calls, we should point out today as well. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Telephone number if you'd like to reach our program today, 736-0300. And it's 34, and we're at 942. Grant Lobes is joining us this morning, taking a big chunk of his schedule. This is not his normal appearance with us, and so we want to thank him for making the time and taking some time with us. He is the Twin Falls County prosecuting attorney. And we have a telephone caller right out of the box, this segment of the program. And caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX with the prosecutor.
Good morning, Mr. Lowe's.
Good morning.
I got a question for you. Isn't, like, for example, outlawing marijuana use, like even for medical use, isn't that kind of like a mechanism to kind of oppress the low income people? Because I don't see any millionaires that have been caught with marijuana that are locked up in county jail. Have you ever taken a survey of what the social parameter of the people that are locked up that have been caught with marijuana? I mean, I think they use it as a mechanism for outlawing everything, and this is kind of like a Bible thumping state that, and also private entities like the CCA, like private prisons. You got to create something in order. It was kind of like
Well, let's get back to that original question for a moment. Do you ask people what their income levels are when you actually have to prosecute them, or how does that work?
Well, with regard to simple possession of marijuana, like having a joint, having a small amount for personal use, which is a misdemeanor in Idaho, and which almost nobody goes to actual jail for. So, like I said before, we're not filling the prisons with those people. We have a surprising number of people who have a pretty good paycheck who are caught with personal use marijuana. With regard to the larger amounts, the people that actually do go to prison, well, I don't really care what their financial condition is, but they are certainly trying to improve it because the point of trafficking in large amounts of marijuana, which is what gets you in prison, is to sell it and make a lot of money. And you do make a lot of money. So, you know, I understand the caller's question, and he's latching on to a commonly stated argument that the prisons are full of income people, and they're full of people who are just trying to get by using mind altering substances to make their lives more manageable. That just isn't true, because the people who are driving around with small amounts of marijuana for their personal use, they're not going to prison. They're not even committing felonies in Idaho, and they're not even going to county jails. But the people who are trying to profit by selling it to, other people, the drug dealers, yeah, they're going to jail. And um, yeah, I hope we get them when they're low income because that'll mean they haven't been successful yet in their business and they haven't made millions on the marijuana or illicit drug trade.
We have another caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Prosecutor Grant Lobes at 9:45. Go ahead.
Thank you, Bill. I just wanted to comment on that caller that was so upset with Republicans over this. I'm a Republican, and I thought nothing better than to go home after a hard day's work and smoke a joint. But I don't want to be driving down I-84 with some guy stoned out of his mind. So, there's no way you can have it both ways.
Right, and the caller, I don't know if he was a part of the Republican establishment or not, or if he's just a person who called himself a Republican, like most people in this state. But of course, I mean, and that is what the challenge is for the legislature, and the challenge is for prosecutors and for judges, is to, in every case where a law violation occurs, is to kind of weigh the factors, the circumstances. If you're in your house and you're smoking a joint, odds are nobody's going to find out about that. If they do, you're guilty of a misdemeanor. If you get caught, you're going to get fined. Um, on the other hand, if you legalize it, you're going to have a lot more incidences of people driving under the influence, as Colorado has, as Washington has, as Oregon has, and the widespread problems will overwhelm our system.
You have been doing this for 2 decades here. So you've seen a lot of people come through the system like a revolving door. I mean, like a carousel. Some of the same
Sure.
names keep
Hmm.
coming back. Here's a point to be made. Some of those people who may have started out probably as marijuana users, have you seen them get involved with other drugs and harder drugs over the years?
Sure, and and that's the gateway drug argument, and there are pros and cons on that. People say, well, it is or it isn't. Obviously, there are a lot of people who use marijuana who don't use heroin and don't use methamphetamine and don't commit crimes other than the use of marijuana. Obviously, that's true. But there are a lot of people who get involved in one mind altering substance, whether it's marijuana or alcohol, and move to others because they just have that sort of personality. I do have a interesting piece of information from Colorado and Washington. Colorado now ranks second, and Washington ranks sixth in the nation for illicit drug use other than marijuana. And of course, they've now opened up the marijuana use. And so Idaho ranks 47th in the nation for that. And as this is from the Center of Behavioral Health Statistics and Quality, the question that they ask is which state's drug policy is working better for its citizens. And I think that it's obvious that when you completely relax the use of one substance, you make problems outside of just whether or not you're smoking marijuana. And Colorado and Washington, and to a lesser extent Oregon, because it's fairly new there, have all kinds of problems throughout their system now because of this.
We have another caller with us. Caller, you're up next. We're coming up on 9:50. It's 34. You're on KLIX with Grant Lopes. All right, we'll try our next caller. Caller, you're on the air. You're on KLIX. Go ahead.
Hey, I got a question. This mother over there in Gooding, giving the baby the butter or marijuana, whatever they call it. Isn't it true she could have given the baby a legal medicine for the baby to save its life instead of marijuana?
Well, I can't comment about that specific case, not only because it would be inappropriate if it were my case, but it's not mine and I don't know the facts. But um, if you have a child who is in distress, I don't think that there's any doctor in the country who would say, go to the kitchen, take the marijuana you've got on hand, mix it up in a blender, and spoon feed it to your child. I don't think any doctor would tell you to do that. There might be a treatment involving marijuana byproducts or marijuana substitutes like Marinol that could help a child. It depends on what the child's problem is. The child in Gooding, I don't know exactly what that child's problem was, but uh, if you just are a person who happens to have a lot of marijuana on hand and you see somebody in distress, I don't think it's wise to, without consulting any doctor, just mix it up and give it to them. There are a lot of children in Colorado who have been getting into what they call marijuana edibles. Because the stores down there that are selling marijuana sell it in cookies and brownies and suckers and lollipops and everything you can think of. And there have been an incredible increase in the number of children coming into emergency rooms for treatment for marijuana overdose. So, yeah, and that goes with anything else. I mean, if you just happen to have a bunch of medicine in the cabinet and your child is in distress, just don't go to the medicine cabinet and crush up whatever you've got and put it in their bottle. Um, Medicines and drugs, marijuana being one of them, uh, can be very dangerous if not regulated properly.
I shared with you off air that when I went to buy NyQuil over the weekend, I had to get the store attendant to come over and punch in a key while I was at the self checkout because that's they regulate how this is being sold to people because of it's strong. Many years ago, I covered as a young reporter a story where young father, and he didn't intend harm, but he was trying to get his baby through a rough night when the baby had a cold, gave the baby enough NyQuil that the baby died. He ended up being arrested, and the other children in the home were taken away. Government isn't going to just stand by and say, well, while we think about it, you can keep the kids. That's the other point. I mean, the one caller said, oh, she's lost her child. Well, uh, they've got to determine what's going on here no matter what. And to sit here and claim that government is just rushing in there and doing that, the safety and welfare of the child is important.
Right, and that, of course, is to echo back to the other caller, and another way in which government is involved in people's lives. It's involved to try to keep you from harming your children, and you can be in favor of that or opposed to it. But the bulk of the people in the state of Idaho, and certainly in the legislature, are in favor of the Department of Health and Welfare acting to save the health and welfare and lives of children.
736-0300, the number to call us if you'd like to speak to Grant Lobes, our Twin Falls County prosecutor, when he's in studio with us this morning. We've got about 6 minutes to go, 34. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. You cited some of those numbers from Colorado, and I am hearing from law enforcers that they are finding, despite the fact that this is said to be harmless and nobody else is being hurt, that they're finding a lot of people involved in car accidents and other issues that have they're seeing a real spike in this because people are driving when they're high and they're doing other things when they're high that they shouldn't be doing.
Right, and I don't want to just get into reading pages and pages of statistics, but I have them here, from the Colorado Department of Transportation, the Highway Safety Administration, reports of marijuana involved in fatalities, reports of, crime being up. The black market is thriving in Colorado because it has now become a place where the black market can get involved in legally producing marijuana and then selling it all over the nation. So there's actually more black market activity in Colorado as a result of legalization. The attorney general, the mayor, the governor, the prosecutors in Colorado cities are all saying, this has been a very bad thing. One of the let's see, this is the mayor of Denver says about states that are thinking of doing this. He says, "Don't repeat our terrible mistake. We were told we would receive all this money. Denver Police Department is asking for more and more to keep up with the black market. Don't repeat our terrible mistake." And we need to actually wait. Actually, Idaho is sometimes behind the times, and that's sometimes a good thing because we can watch and wait and see what happens in these other states. And, if in 5 years everything is great in these places and they're raking in money and there are no health problems and everything is going well, I might be on here to tell you something different. My opinion might change, but the information we're getting right now is exactly the opposite. And Idaho has the luxury of sitting and waiting and seeing how these other states do.
9:55, about 2 minutes to go. We'll see if we can squeeze in one last caller. Try line number 2 then. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Good morning, Bill. I just want to make a statement that, a libertarian that called you, of course, everybody's going too much to one side because I am a conservative and I believe he has the right to do what he wants as long as it doesn't harm anyone else. But as soon as you start smoking the joint and you get in your car, it's no different than having too many drinks, which is illegal. Now you are doing somebody else, and your little drive-by guy, making it for poor people. If you got money to buy dope, why are you on food stamps?
Hey, good question.
I was going to ask him if he's got a low cost marijuana supplier available because, in my experience, people who we do catch and we do prosecute, I mean, they're spending a lot of money on this. It's not cheap. And that goes back, and if I can go back just one more time to this question about the oil that people want to get to treat their children with epilepsy, that is not cheap stuff. You go to Colorado to get that is outrageously expensive. If we allow the trials to go forward that are going forward, if we support what the governor's done to try to test this in a pharmaceutical clean environment with medical oversight, we might get this approved as an actual drug that can be given by your doctor and your pharmacist, and the costs will be substantially less, I think. And potentially you can get it paid for by insurance. Insurance isn't going to pay for you to get in your car and go to Colorado and load your trunk with something that you know the drug dealer guy in Colorado made to sell on the internet. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So I think people need to across the board on this need to cool down, need to look at the facts, need to try to realize that you know there are ways to handle this in a rational way. And I think that the current way that Idaho is doing this is measured, is conservative, is we're not rushing in to be the first state to do this or that, and we don't need to. We can wait and watch.
Again, for people who'd like to contact your office if they've got a question or comment,
736-4020.
want to thank Prosecutor Grant Lobes for joining us this morning. And in fact, we'll see you in about 3 weeks again.
That's right.
Coming up on a Tuesday morning.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. 9:58, and we've got a short break, and then, of course, news from Fox, and Rush Limbaugh will follow the Fox newscast at 10 o'clock. Bill Colley with you as well, and God willing, if the creek don't rise, I'll be back to do this all over again tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock.